All right. All right. So you've probably heard, literally, and then from other people about there's a cicada thing going on right now. In fact, if you listen, you can kind of hear them outside. I was on the Durham Bull City subreddit a couple nights ago, and someone was like, what's this like tornado siren thing going on in the background? And everyone was kind of chiming in saying like, oh yeah, there's cicadas. So yeah, we are experiencing something really, really unique. And it actually, there's a fair amount that affects us as arborists. And I want to go over, I'm not a cicada expert. I've just read, there's been like 5 articles published by NC State over the last couple weeks. I've read them all and then looked at a few other resources. So I'm going to give you a crash course 101, what you can, some basic information to answer questions that you might come across, and then just to also spark your own curiosity, because this is really cool, what we are experiencing right now. So they're here. Contrary to my horror motif, which I don't know why I get stuck on these horror things so much. It's like my childhood, I guess. But yeah, this is not scary. The TLDR is don't worry about your trees unless they're like really, really small, and maybe hold off planting trees for a few weeks. That's the TLDR, but we'll get into it. All right. So you might have seen a Roman numeral attached to this cicada and then heard that it's a 13-year cicada. And you may have noticed the Roman numeral is different from the number attached to the cicada's lifespan. So we've got the 13-year cicada, which is what we're hearing right now. That means they live for 13 years. The vast majority of that time is subterranean, feeding on tree roots. The Roman numeral just has to do with the way that they were cataloged. So not particularly interesting, other than the fact that this brood 19, is known as the Great Southern Brood. It's the largest brood of the 13-year cicadas, and it has the widest range, but it is limited to the southeast. And a really quick, so the dog day cicadas, or they call them the dog day cicadas, the annual cicadas, the ones that are out every year, they're called dog day cicadas because they emerge in like June and July, the dog days of summer. We are not seeing any of those right now. It's a little too early, but if we were, the way that you would differentiate the two is by looking at the red eyes. The red eyes are going to be the longer lived 13-year periodical cicadas. Interestingly enough, take a look at this photo, you might see 3 little dots in between the two sort of scary bug eyes. Those are also eyes. So they have 5 eyes total that they're used to kind of, if I'm remembering what I read correctly, they think that they are used to sort of differentiate between light and shadow. All right. So this picture on the left, you might notice these little marble-sized holes in the ground. Those are actually emergence holes. If you're looking closely, you should be seeing those occasionally. And if you get really lucky and you sit below a tree long enough, you look for some rustling in the leaf litter, you might be able to see some cicadas emerging from the ground. I don't know if we're past the point of emergence yet, and now all that are going to come out are out, but you might still get lucky. I had a really beautiful moment one evening last week where I was just sitting at the base of a beach, kind of like watching them come out of the ground. I even helped a few, like plucked them and stuck them on the tree. I know. It's the growing up on like Disney, Bambi. You know, you want to help nature. I'm sure it's terrible, and I just doomed them to death. But so one of the reasons why they emerge all at once is it's to overwhelm the predators that would feed on them. So the predators rapidly hit this point of satiation. So I batched like this 1.5 week curry, and I know that I'm going to be sick of it in about 3 days. And I'm going to wish I had something else to eat. That's essentially their strategy with predators. They overwhelm them, they get their fill, and then the rest of them. So like that front line is just fodder. Yeah, Michael?
Was it a cicada curry?
Yes, it was a cicada curry. If you want to eat the cicadas, they are edible. You just want to get them while they're still kind of like albino. That's when they're soft. People deep fry them. I would try it if someone else prepared it, but... All right, so we're going to get into a little bit of the differences between these periodical cicadas and our normal annual cicadas. If you're a fancy boy like me that gets his chain sharpened at Home Depot, you have soft hands and clean boots, you might refer to them as magicicadas. That is the Latin for the genus, so magic cicada. So there's a lot of kind of like folklore around these. Apparently some Native Americans saw them as kind of an evil omen, but ecologically speaking, they're pretty beneficial. So as they emerge, they're much more abundant than the periodical cicadas. Again, there is at least part of the reason that ecologists think that might happen is because of this predator satiation. And they call them broods. Broods, it's not a scientific term, it's more of like a bookkeeping term. There are different broods. There are other broods of 13-year cicadas, so this isn't the only kind of group of 13-year cicadas. I think there's 5 species of 13-year cicadas. They have a much longer lifespan. The periodical or dog day cicadas, 1 to 2 years approximately. These 13 years, the majority of which, as I mentioned, is subterranean. Geographic range. Cicadas are globally distributed. Periodical cicadas, both the 13 and the 17-year cicadas, we are not getting the 17-year cicadas. I think that's more of a Midwest, kind of Illinois is the only place, southern Illinois, where the 2 broods are overlapping. So much longer lifespan. These, much more limited geographic range. So Eastern United States is the only place in the world where we get these much longer lived cicadas. So this is a regional thing. We're really lucky to be able to experience this. It's a reason to kind of be present and enjoy it and understand that this sort of constant drone is, this isn't like an annual thing. So the last kind of primary difference is going to be the timing of the emergence and then just the total quantity that's emerging at once. Again, we're getting the periodical cicadas right now. It's going to be another couple months before we start seeing the annual cicadas. I'm not an entomologist. I'm sure there's like some variation in timing there. There may be a little bit of overlap, but I have a video showing the sound, but we can just shut up and listen. That's it. Yeah. I think it wasn't quite obvious at first, and it's come up on most of my property visits. Usually we talk about cicadas because their little exoskeletons are everywhere. We'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, it's just, I think it's a really wonderful noise, but I'm the type of person that sleeps with like a fan directly in my face. I like that white noise. And again, it's of limited duration, and it's all of the super, super horny male cicadas. That's all sex stuff that we're listening. They're trying to attract a mate. Only the males make the noise. They have these like structures on their exoskeletons called tymbals that vibrate. They don't like rub parts together like grasshoppers. They actually have these sort of specialized structures that produce these noises. So really quickly, the lifespan of a cicada. So as nymphs that look different, they're wingless, underground. They attach themselves to smaller roots. They're active. They're not dormant. And they tap into the xylem and they suck that, like primarily water, a little bit of sugar, some mineral nutrients, and that's what they feed on. They don't have like biting mouth parts. They don't sting. They don't vector disease. They're not going to bite your dogs. They're safe, in other words. And so once they've completed their life cycle, they go through a few different stages and they emerge. They look for a vertical surface, oftentimes a tree, but I've seen the sides of houses covered in cicadas as well. They struggle out of their exoskeleton and their wings slowly inflate, so they need to be on a vertical surface. And then they are albino, as we see in this photo initially, and then they darken over time. And I thought at first maybe it was a different species, but it just has to do with how long they've been out. And then the females, once they've successfully mated, they have a lifespan of about a month once they become adults. And the females they have these really, really specialized ovipositors, or this egg-laying sort of apparatus. Theirs is able to kind of saw small, thin bark sections of trees, so about pencil size is where they look to lay their eggs. We can see this is what the damage looks like on the left, and then you can see like the little row of eggs there. And that's what the females are going to be doing. And so let's talk about the type of damage that we're going to see on trees. So the nymphs do feed on the roots. They are technically parasites, but there is a great book that had a passage that directly addressed this concern that maybe that's causing harm to trees. It doesn't. The development is so slow. It's a 13-year time frame that they're underground, and these are pretty small, like little insects. They're not siphoning off enough for it to be too much of a detriment to the tree. And then the other type of damage, again, it's going to show up as flagging once everything is kind of said and done and the dust is settled. You're going to see trees with a lot of browning, kind of hanging leaf edges. It's essentially free end weight reduction. They're just attacking small diameter stems, so they're being good arborists, in other words, just small diameter pruning cuts. And but some people might find it unsightly, but it's nothing that we really need to address unless people are just like really wanting to control everything in their yard. It will damage small trees, and that's why I said earlier it might be a good reason to sort of offset or waylay your planting plans. Let's get past this emergence, and then you'll be good to go. But that's what NC State was recommending, even to orchardists, farmers, is just hold on a bit before you start. Cicadas, they don't have biting mouthparts. They're not eating leaves. And for very valuable, like young trees and shrubs, you can cover them with like a fine netting if people are really concerned about it. All right, so that's what the damage is going to look like on small stems. Here's a photo I found on the internet of what it might look like for a larger tree, that flagging damage. Again, this isn't going to substantially damage the tree. Arguably, it even helps them out a little bit. As the cicadas die, their bodies fall down to the earth where they decompose, and a lot of those nutrients are returned back to the soil. And then as well, as they are tunneling underground, creating these like complex systems, they're aerating the soil. So that's another way in which the presence of these cicadas benefit the environment. And then also, because they're sucking on trees, it's another way in which trees or plants being the primary source of energy generation within an ecosystem, it's this huge rush of energy. Think about like Costco selling their rotisserie chicken at like half off. Huge food source, a rush of like new abundant energy into an ecosystem that things like copperheads, turtles, all kinds of animals are going to be taking advantage of that. I don't know if we have time for this. I'll tell you about it later. But there's also this crazy psychedelic sex butt fungus. How's that for a title? That affects some of these cicadas and makes them go crazy and have extra amounts of sex, but it rots out their genitals and then they just spread the spores, and it's pretty wild. And it's shown up on a few in North Carolina, so fiend.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.